floral business, I think, cutting roses. I cut about 4 dozen out for a little Sunday, and you didn't even notice it, you know. Just,
wow.
Well, I'll let you come and work in my yard, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
Cutting them back is the key.
And Gregory, I'll let y'all come and work in my yard. I don't do I don't do that.
I never promised her a rose garden, but she got one anyway. Ooh, I couldn't resist that. Okay, we're live on YouTube, I see, and I think we'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I think you all know we're also waiting for the verdict to be read and the Chauvin case. And so we'll stand by and see what happens with that. As the meeting goes by, we may bring up a matter regarding that after we're done with our topic of redistricting. So Madam Clerk, you've noted, I think everyone is here, maybe Councilmember Waring and Griffin now arrived. And so I think we're all present, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
Great, terrific. So thank you all for joining us. I must admit, I don't have an agenda in front of me. And I don't know. It's probably very simple, but we'll call Councilmember Seekings to give us an invocation today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members. Heavenly Father, bless us all and keep us under your wing. May your divinity shine on us all and fill us with your grace. Allow us to feel your presence as we set about in our duties, mindful of your humble guidance. For those in need or feeling the effects of ill health, we pray for your gentle hand of relief and recovery. Let us strive together and with your guidance to make a better and more united world. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance right here. I pledge allegiance
to the flag.
United
States of America.
and
to the republic
for which it stands, one
nation
nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. So we'll start with a discussion regarding the redistricting.
Mayor, the judge has just entered into the courtroom. This may be the time the verdict is coming in. We will take a pause to see what happens. The verdict is going to be read in 2 seconds, looks like.
The pleasure of counsel.
Doesn't matter.
Here it comes.
Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they appear on the permanent record of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, defendant. Verdict, count 1. Court file number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter, as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m.
Guilty.
Signed, juror 4%, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter, as to count 2, third-degree murder perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury 4%, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter, as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are either true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yes. Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yes. Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yes. Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yeah.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yes. Juror number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yes. Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yeah.
Juror number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts, so say you one, so say you all?
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer your questions and to advise you further. So, all rise for the jury.
All right, thank you. There was a delay in the sound from where you were broadcasting versus mine, but I guess the verdict was guilty on all 3 counts, correct?
That's correct, Judge. Mayor.
All right. You see it?
Well, this has been a
We're going to have
whole
Blakely, you may file.
tragedy since the death of George Floyd almost a year ago has been a real tragedy in our country, and I do hope that the trial will bring a sense of justice, although you can't bring someone, you'll never bring Mr. Floyd back, obviously, but hopefully we'll bring some sense of justice here. So let's discuss this matter, if you don't mind, after we go through the redistricting. Both Tracy McKee and Julia Copeland have a little presentations to run through with us with what staff has been working on to kind of uncover all the facts about what we know with reapportionment and timing and the legality of all this. So Tracy, if you don't mind kicking us off, that would be great.
I think we may have lost Tracy.
Did we lose her?
Yeah, I think we just lost her.
She was just there. Yeah,
Let's- We might want to give her just a couple moments to sign back on.
Yeah. She looked all ready to go there.
what happened?
All right, well, not seeing Tracy's show back up. Julia, you want to proceed with your portion?
Sure. I'm happy to proceed with my portion. I feel bad for Tracy. It's like presenter's worst nightmare.
She'll be back.
She will be back.
I just got a text from her. She's rebooting her computer. As
Oh.
we-
No. Okay.
Rebooting it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let's see how long that takes. It did kind of flow from hers first, if y'all don't mind.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir. Councilmember Griffin.
did we already add the item to the agenda that Susan asked us about?
We have not.
Should we go ahead and do that? Because
We could, I'd entertain a motion to add that.
I'll make a motion that we add that item
I'll second.
regarding the potential curfew
Okay.
executive order to the agenda.
Terrific. Okay, we'll take that matter up first since, as fate has had it. Susan, do you want to introduce that?
We need to
please?
vote, Mr. Mayor, to add it to the agenda.
Oh, correct. Yeah, all in favor of adding to the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it.
And Mayor, with the understanding that there is an exigent circumstance, which is the reason why we're adding it to the agenda at this point in time.
Correct.
Thank you.
Exactly. And do you want to introduce the matter itself, the proposed ordinance?
Yes, sir. So this is an emergency ordinance, which we're asking for you to authorize the mayor in consultation with the police chief to implement a curfew for public health and safety when necessary or if necessary. There's no curfew that we're asking to be in place right now, but basically we're requesting you all give the mayor, with the advice of the police chief, the general authority to impose a curfew time and day and place to be determined by them. We think it's important to have this authority in the mayor and chief's toolbox, given how quickly these circumstances change. And we, are recommending this in order to protect, obviously, public safety and property, and to make sure that we are absolutely prepared to respond to any situation that may arise as a result of the verdict in the Chauvin trial, as well as any other emerging circumstances that are taking place across the country and in our state. Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
For
Susan.
approval.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor of Councilmember Griffin?
Mr. Mayor? Yes, sir. I'm just wondering why we would need this exactly. Why couldn't we just reconvene city council to take a vote to have a curfew? Especially with the way the verdict just came out, which I think we're all very happy about. I don't understand why would we to implement a curfew, even consider it at this point. When
Well,
the verdict,
as Susan described, it's a matter of having a tool in the toolbox and being able to pull the tool out promptly if needed, even though I feel this is a positive verdict for the trial. There's certainly another
I don't
incident.
mean to interrupt, but could someone turn off their television? I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah, that's good.
Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. There have been other events, including the death of Dante Wright just a week ago, which led to the march and protests that we saw in the city on Sunday evening. I want to commend Chief Reynolds and our police department and the way they handled that event, but they have requested that we have this tool in our toolbox, and frankly, I feel it's appropriate to have it. I can assure you it would be most judiciously considered before recommending one, and I would immediately communicate with council as to if that need arose. Any further discussion? Councilmember Shade?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that. That there have been certain events have happened across our country since last year in particular what happened in the last month. Things that are out of our control, things that have occurred in other jurisdictions. But we saw the assembly that took place on Sunday. I commend the chief for being prepared for that, having his men and women out there. They averted anything from happening that could have turned into violence. I think that we are, at least I am, I'll speak for myself, I'm relieved that this verdict has come in the way that it did. I think there was a whole lot of apprehension locally. I think there was a whole lot of apprehension nationally as to what this verdict could have been and the impact that it had. We still, we're not out of the woods completely with this. I think that we probably are, but why not have to be on the safe side? Let's be cautious with this. We saw too much what happened last year with something that started off relatively peaceful that turned into something very violent in a very short period of time. Let's not take that chance. This is a very short time frame for this curfew. And I would suspect that the mayor would probably let us know what his thinkings are, or thoughts were, if something was turning sour very quickly. But this just gives him the opportunity to do that, and for a short period of time. And if we don't need it, we don't need it.
Thank you. Councilmember Waring?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we, and I understand all of that, can we hear from the chief Reynolds can kind of walk us through even Sunday and that situation up to where we are now, knowing that the verdict is what has been delivered today?
Sure. Chief Reynolds, are you on the line?
He is not, but I can get him on the line real quick. He heard the redistricting, and I think he was going to try and get from headquarters to somewhere else in the interim. So
okay.
He told me to call him if you guys wanted to hear from him, so I'll have him call in.
Okay, that's great. In the meantime, Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question was geared a little bit more towards Chief Reynolds, and I think that it may be helpful when he comes on the line to.
Okay, I can wait for him. Does anybody have any other comments that don't require the chief? Or
Mr. Mayor, I apologize that I didn't retain the length of time we would be giving you this authority. Is it 48 hours?
The normal emergency ordinance is for 60 days, and I think it's for that.
Yeah. 60 days. Okay.
It can be ended at any time. Okay.
The chief is calling in now, so.
Okay, great. And let me also, in my commendation of their efforts on Sunday, also say that they allowed those gathered to express themselves and, express their concerns and exercise their First Amendment rights. So we by all means want people to speak up, but we just want them to follow the rules, so to speak. And sometimes that can be challenging. Chief?
I'm not sure that he's signed on. I don't see him on yet.
I thought Steve said he had come on, so we'll give him yet another minute.
He's trying to sign on. I think he's on his cell phone. So.
I got you. Ding dong. There you are. Hey, Chief. Councilmember Waring, you want to restate your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I wanted to know, leading up from Sunday, obviously, show of force, up to the verdict that's been delivered today, Can you explain to us some of your needs as a police chief for this ordinance to be able to be on an emergency basis? Can you tell us what you're trying to do? In other words, what you'd like to have the rights, the authority to do or not do, frankly.
You're on mute, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the verdict is the correct verdict. It's I think people demanded justice. I think they demanded accountability. I think they demanded justice in the killing of George Floyd. But I have to say that the anger, the demand for justice, the pain is not just gone because of this verdict. My focus has never been solely on the verdict of George Floyd's killing. I think that's a part of a much bigger discussion. And I think you have Dante Wright, you have a lieutenant in the military just within the last week who was accosted by the police. It appeared not to be a very good interaction, and a variety of other things that are in the front of the news. And so there's also post verdict celebration concerns. There's, as we speak, a protester doing a live news conference talking about things that frankly, there's a lot of people with a lot of emotion saying a lot of things that I don't believe are unifying or helpful to our community. And so I think the message has to be that we continue to work together for unity, to solve problems, to get through this period of our city where we come together, that we do not have any violence. And I think we have to pay very close attention as we navigate tonight and the days ahead. So just because a verdict has been delivered, I do not believe that the concerns in our community are over with. On any given day, we have violence and other issues. And as we learned May 30th of last year, it doesn't take much to erupt an emotional crowd who has anger that is built up over the years, who've experienced things that they want their voices to be heard and uplifted. So we have upstaffing. We have a lot of plans in place. I've been in contact with my federal, state, and local counterparts today. And the nation, the state, the region, our city, we're all preparing and we're going to continue to be focused on keeping our city safe, uplifting those people's voices that want to be heard, making sure that they're peaceful and lawful, and those people that choose to not be lawful and commit any acts of violence or crime or unlawful activities, we need to be prepared to deal with. So this ordinance and this emergency discussion is simply a way of giving us a tool, an option. No matter what we do, I think it would be a coordinated discussion with whatever communities that may or may not be affected by the need to enact such an ordinance. But I think having that tool on our tool belt, having that in our pockets, the ability to implement a curfew is a really good idea. It's something that, frankly, of all the stones that I think we've overturned, that's one of them that needs to be done. And it's more precautionary and it's more just in case. Do I have a reason to do that tonight, right now? No. And I hope that doesn't occur where that's necessary. But there are people, as we've seen, and we saw it on Sunday, who have chosen not to adhere to our permitting process, who have made it very clear that they do not want to obey the law. They do not want to adhere to safe practices. And some of those groups are growing in number, and they want to have a negative impact on our city. And we're going to deal with that and make sure that we don't have violence or those types of problems that we had last year. And so that's why we're having this discussion. I think hopefully that answers your question.
Let me have one follow-up. Chief, great answer. Do you think we need this for 60 days?
I think I haven't really talked to that one specifically with the mayor, but I think 30 days is adequate, and then a re-discussion, and a re-up. But that's not my bailiwick, but I would say 30 days would certainly give us a good gauge of where our country, where our region, where this narrative is going to take us.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief, for everything you're doing and continuing to do. And I just had a question, and I'm not seeking anything that is considered tactical or that would put your men and women in harm's way in any way, shape, or form. But I think it might be helpful for the public if we could maybe talk at a very 10,000-foot level about the utility of a curfew. Why do we have a curfew? I've heard some comments to the effect of, well, why don't you just arrest the bad guys? Well, I sort of have my thoughts on that, but I thought that it might be better to hear from you, an expert in this, like what is the purpose of this mechanism that we're talking about today?
Well, let me address those people that think we should arrest the bad guys. We do that every single day. We're fighting violence in our city every day. We're arresting people with guns every single night. We got 7 guns off the street. I think Friday night, we got 2 more Saturday night. We've gotten machine guns. We've gotten our officers shot at this year. I could go on and on about that. I think that's important. I agree that we should arrest the bad guys. In a large protest environment where there's large numbers of people, it takes a lot of our bodies to get to that point. And that is not the best place for us to be, where we confront people and we're making arrests. We will make arrests, we've made arrests, and we'll continue to make arrests. That is not the only way to do it. And so a big part of managing peacefully and successfully a First Amendment protest event is by upstaffing, it's by communicating with the protesters, it's by having a plan, it's by adhering to the plan, allowing them to have their voices heard, allowing them to exercise their First Amendment rights. There's a lot of people that would just say, hey, they don't have any business here. Well, actually they do. The law protects the First Amendment. People have a right to be heard, to have their message be heard. And no matter what the content is, it's not for us to tell them what to say. It's for us to help them do that peacefully. And that takes additional staffing, it takes strategies, and it takes a lot of people working together. And it's not just the police department, it's the community working together with us as well. Not sure if I answered your question. Was that a good answer?
I think it was responsive. Anyone else before I go back to Councilmember Griffin? Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. And Chief, I think you did a great job Sunday night. I think that your officers did a great job diffusing the situation. And I think if we, look at that entire situation, yes, obviously there were some people that got out in the street. I saw a picture where there was a little bit of a standoff of sorts, but it was a very good compromise. You allowed people to exercise their First Amendment. You kept people safe. What I'm worried about is, number one, I saw some pictures of patrons at restaurants sitting outside, being right in the middle of the fray, and I saw the look on their faces, and it wasn't good. But at the same time, I understand that, we all agree that Charleston is very wide open right now, and our business community downtown is flourishing after a very, very tough year. And if we were to prematurely execute a curfew, we're going to shut down a lot of businesses that really need the business right now. They're just now starting to come back, not to mention the perception when we start shutting down businesses, what that can do. It could cause a lot of people to leave this city. I think we're doing a great job of being very proactive. I thought that the response of your troops, I thought the response of how you've put the message out has been fantastic. I think your guys did an amazing job of keeping the peace. My question is, what would it hurt if we felt like there was an imminent need coming for a curfew? What would it hurt for us to meet as a council and have that discussion rather than find out about it after the fact? I think as a city council, as an elected body, I don't think it would hurt for us to call an emergency session of city council and have this discussion. I think it would be beneficial to have this discussion rather than find out about it after the fact. And I don't think that making that decision from one person is the right call. I think that this dialogue here today is very beneficial for all of our citizens. So that's all I'm saying. What benefit by making it an executive action from one person does that do? Whereas we can easily hop on a Zoom call within 10 or 15 minutes and meet as a council and make that decision together.
So if I can respond to that, and that I will just first of all agree that doing a curfew is not something that we want to do. We've developed a good relationship with all of our communities. The business community is impacted significantly by something like that on many levels. The city, as you articulate, not just the certain businesses, but it's a big effect on a lot of different things. If on the other hand, we had an event like we had last year and everybody painfully remembers the horrible millions and millions of dollars of loss and experience that we had, and things go sideways like that, I promise you, I've had many, many, many very direct conversations with our business owners, and they would be the first ones to say, we don't want to get stuck in our businesses being assaulted and shot and looted and having our windows broken and all those other things, and have the council calling a meeting. We want a curfew and we want the safest possible outcome. If that means we need to shut down early, even with the COVID, I got really good feedback from the businesses that I'd say many of the businesses, I'd say probably a majority, liked closing earlier. And so I can't speak to the politics of that, but I'll just say when I need to make that decision, I don't want to wait for a council call. I need that decision to be made quickly, efficiently, and that's the only thing that we don't have right now that I need at some point to be able to say, we're closing the park, we're enacting a curfew, we're going to start closing roads, and we're going to not allow anybody to come back in here, so that we never, ever, ever have what happened again last year to our businesses, to our visitors, to our tourists. My daughter works on King Street. I love King Street. I love this city. And I think this is an important tool that will help us keep it safe.
Thank you, Chief. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Del Chapo.
Just as someone who has residents who live downtown, I think they would feel good knowing that whatever needs to be done to help keep them safe can be done and quickly. I am a little leery about the 60-day time frame. I don't know if emergency ordinances have to have a minimum, or if it can be for 24 hours or a week or something like that. I feel like 60 days and maybe even 30. We're certainly meeting in the meantime, and should things progress, we will find ourselves meeting in the meantime. To me, this is more, we're convened right now. So if something were to happen, if something were to transpire in the next, 12 to 24 hours, we have this accessible. But, like I said, and my fellow downtown council members can speak, but, I believe that my folks would want to know that this is available for them.
Thank you. Councilmember Shade, you had your hand up again.
I was going to make a motion there to amend this from a 60-day to a 30-day window.
Second.
All right.
I think that's prudent. And as Councilmember Del Chapo said, we will probably meet maybe once, maybe twice in between that time. And so if we need to extend it, we can do it then. If we need to do other measures, we can do it as well. And I just want to echo, because I have been in contact with the chief throughout this and talked with him. These things can turn very quickly. And I just want, I went back and looked at the calendar. George Floyd was killed on a Monday, Memorial Day. And it was that Saturday, several days later. And I don't think anybody had an inkling as to what the level of violence was going to take place in our community on that late Saturday afternoon, evening. And it turned very quickly. And it did take a while for us to assemble. It just wasn't a matter of 5 or 10 minutes. It was a Saturday. We were all doing our different things with our friends and families, as we should be doing. And it did take a little while for us to assemble. And the chief needed that authority. The mayor needed that authority much more quickly, and that's available. This is not something that we're going to impose radically or as a knee-jerk reaction. The police have got their ear to the railroad tracks. They're out there listening. They know what's going on. They got good intelligence out there. They got good sources out there as what is occurring. And as soon as they smell something that turns sour, they'll go to the mayor. And I think that's what's going to happen in this instance. It may not happen at all. I feel a little more optimistic and relieved, but I just think that this is just prudent. And if anything from last year taught us anything, was to be extraordinarily more prepared than before. And that's just what we're trying to do here. So I think we got a second on the motion to amend it 30 days.
That's most reasonable. Back to Councilmember Del Chapo, and then let's call the question.
What would be the consideration of scaling it back even more? And we have council on Tuesday. If we make it effective through Tuesday, or would we take it back up on Tuesday to see if it needs to continue, or if it discontinues at that point? I don't want a full 30 days to go without revisiting this is my concern.
Well, we can bring it up whenever we meet, and if we make it for 30 days, which I think is reasonable under the circumstances, and we have a meeting or the next meeting, and y'all say, let's make a motion, let's just end it. We can make that decision whenever we meet.
Can we then make it? I don't know if I need to make this formal or get agreement on it, but to have it on our agenda for Tuesday night, and we kind of get an update at that point, if not sooner, if need be.
Sure, we can have an update on this on Tuesday night. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. I think we have a public safety meeting before the next council. Why don't we put on the committee agenda, Jennifer, and then have it report up to council? Is that satisfactory?
That's satisfactory, Mr. Mayor.
I think that's great.
Okay.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So if I may call a question on the ordinance as amended to a 30-day limit, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much. I do think this is a wise thing to have this tool in our toolbox. I remember so clearly on the evening of May 30th, and frankly, we waited until there were many lessons learned, okay? And we've been through those, but one of them that I remember clearly is that we really called for the ability to have the curfew after the first glass was broken. And y'all, that was too late. It was too late. So this gives us the ability to do what we need to do if needed. I feel good about things. I don't think we're going to need this, but again, it's good to have in our pocket. So without further ado, now Tracy, you're rebooted, you're online. You want to start with your portion, the redistricting discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And good evening, council members. So tonight is really information only. There's not going to be any action taken on redistricting, but we recognize that this is a process that is new to most of you as an elected official. So we really wanted to provide some background information, and also legal is going to walk you through some of the options for how we go through adopting, for adoption of the new district boundaries. Sorry, got a little tickle in my throat. So why do we do this? You all probably are very aware of why we do this, but it's to meet constitutional requirements of one person, one vote. How do we get this done? So we're going to follow the constitutional and statutory principles. We will go through iterations of a few different maps Once we start to get consensus on a solid plan, we will hold a public hearing. And then this does require 2 readings of council with a plan map and or description. So this does require council action to implement new district boundaries. So what are our legal requirements? Some of you, well, I know some of you know, and some of you who were not here 10 years ago may not know that in the past, we had to submit our plans to the US DOJ for pre-clearance. So that is no longer a requirement. So we do not have to do that this time. And also there are some places that will try to, or I think that they use voting age population to reapportion. Total population can be used for the 1 person, 1 vote as opposed to voting age. And we at the city, I know we use total population the last 2 times. Unfortunately, I know that personally. I can't believe I'm here to do this a 3rd time for the city. And so while we do take great care and have great interest in preserving majority minority districts, we cannot use race as a predominant factor in redistricting. So what are the key principles that we're going to use for redistricting? Obviously, the primary one is 1 person, 1 vote. And our goal is that we want less than 10% deviation. So that means when we are done, each district will have the same number of people, not to deviate by more than 10%. Each district has to be contiguous. Compactness, that's really kind of a visual test of our redistricting maps. Constituent consistency. So this is kind of is 2-pronged. So this means we don't want to change people's districts. We want to minimize the impact to voters, right? So we don't want to change their district if we don't have to. But that also means preserving the council member that's in that district. So meaning we do whatever we can to not draw somebody out of their district through the whole process. So there's 2 pieces to that. And then we do want to consider communities of interest. So how do we keep neighborhoods or areas of the city that identify together? How do we keep those together in a new plan? So what are the technical requirements that we need? So the release of this PL 94-171 data set from the US Census is what is kind of the jumping off point for this whole process. So once that's released, then we actually use GIS software. Luckily, we have a stellar GIS team who is just wonderful, and they have all the expertise needed to do the analysis and help create the district boundaries. So that touches a little bit on who, but I do want to emphasize this is the city council plan, right? So this is your plan. You must give the final approval for the plan through a city ordinance. In the previous 2 redistricting efforts, we met with every city council member one-on-one and listened to concerns or desires and tried to bake all of those into the final plan wherever we could and however we could. We also met with a lot of community groups, a lot of stakeholders. And so we had talked about maybe creating a redistricting commission that would act kind of like in a role that would provide some credibility to our process, but also make sure that the process and the plans represent the whole community as well. So making sure that we're very inclusive in the process. And this is just kind of some of the groups that we thought should be engaged through that commission, or we'd be part of the commission simply because of their involvement with redistricting in the past. Obviously, City Council plays a big role in this, but the Riley Center, League of Women Voters, NAACP, and the South Carolina Coalition for Voter Participation. That's not meant to be a comprehensive list, just to give you an idea of some of the groups that might be represented on a commission if it was a desire of council to form such a commission. I also want to mention that the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office is available to provide consulting to us as well. They are the official liaison for the state of South Carolina to the U.S. Census Department. They do provide redistricting services to municipalities and counties throughout the state that don't have the technical skills in-house to be able to draw their own plans, but they can act as a consultant for us to try to another look over our shoulders, right, to make sure that we feel good about our plan and the way that we've gone about it. And obviously, city staff will be very involved, but under the guidance of City Council throughout the whole process. When? This is a big question, I think, as a lot of you know. Again, this all hinges on the release of that data set by the U.S. Census Department. We normally get that data set by March 30th after a census year. So we all know that we have not received it. They are telling us that we should receive it on September 30th. So that is the date that we know of at this moment. So now I'm going to turn it over to the legal team, who will really kind of walk you through some of the options for timing and how all that adoption of the maps can happen.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are going to give you a brief presentation as well. Our goal tonight really is to arm you with as much information as we've gathered regarding your options with regard to how you want to proceed with the elections and whether or not they are considered defensible if challenged in a court of law. So once I go through this presentation, please know that we will share these slides with you. I'll share any case law you might want to see so that you can review and analyze it on your own, because ultimately we want you to be able to make an educated decision as to which option is best for the city and for your constituents. So with that said, let me see if I know how to screen share. This is always interesting. Okay, can you all see that? Excellent. Yes. Okay. Election 2021, dun, dun, dun. Here we go. Let's start with some context, okay? Our current timeline that we're gonna be working with, and of course, Tracy shared some of that, but just know, your formal filing window will be the first Monday of August to October 2nd. And the release of the data is scheduled for September 30th, but that's still a big question mark. We don't know if it's going to come out on that date or if it's going to be challenged. And our election day, of course, is November 7th. And just as an aside, Charleston Water Systems also has a seat up for election as well that will be on this date. The average time, just historically, for the city to redistrict and adopt new maps is around 2 to 3 months from what we've gathered from the data. And also, just so you know, the cost of the 2019 election to the city was about $123,000. So I wanted to give you those things just to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this. So what are our options, ladies and gentlemen?
Hey, Julia, before you go on from that slide, can you go
Sure.
back to that timeline?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that right? The first Monday of August, October 2nd is the filing window?
That's when it opens, according to the Election Commission website.
Yeah, but we only usually have a 2-week filing period, not a 2-month filing period.
Okay.
That seems, I don't think that, we just need to look at that, because I'm pretty sure we only open up for 2 weeks for filing.
I think that's correct.
Yes, I occur with that too. Councilman Sicken is right. It's only 2 weeks. For long as I've been on council, it's only 2 weeks in August.
All right.
Unless
so first
that's
Monday.
for CWS.
No, it's the same for all of them. They all
Yes.
close within 2 weeks.
It's all.
Okay.
It's all.
All right. Well, that actually helps us even more, because if the census data is going to come out post window closing. So excellent. Thank you for that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
No, quite all right. I appreciate it. So our options, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we could adopt a new map and delay the election to spring of 2022 using that new map, or we could proceed with the 2021 November elections using the current map. And the requirement for a special election, I am going to touch on that as we get further down the slides, but I just wanted you to keep in mind, these are the two options that we're going to talk about in this presentation. And just so you know, the Municipal Association of South Carolina has released a statement basically saying that under federal and state law, either option is defensible. And we're going to go through the reasons why. And ultimately, it's a decision for you as council to make going forward, taking into account local politics, demographics, and population trends. So with that in mind, let's talk about option one, shall we? Let's talk about delaying the election until the spring of 2022. We, of course, by home rule have that option. Specifically, Code Section 51550 gives to the municipal governing body the absolute authority to set the time for general and special elections. We have one Supreme Court case in South Carolina that talks to this and cites to this statute, and again supports the notion that we do have the ability to hold our elections whenever we wish. South Carolina Attorney General, there's quite a few opinions floating around regarding this particular issue. I shared just a few with you that I think really hit on the point that you can, as a municipality, extend or shorten terms of council members by an ordinance. The only thing you must do is make sure that you state that it is reasonable and for a public purpose if challenged. And also, just bear in mind the notion that while you're waiting for the election to approach in the spring of 2022, you are essentially extending your time in office, and the people that are coming in after you are shortening their term in office. But those options are defensible according to South Carolina state law and our Attorney General. So with regard to delaying the election date, the things you, yes, sir?
Do we need, if we do extend a council member's term, do we need to pass an ordinance to do that, or does it just automatically roll over until that spring election?
I think if we adopt the idea of delaying the election till the spring of 2022, we would insert that into the ordinance. I think it would just happen naturally, but it's always good to cover that in the language of the ordinance.
Thanks.
Sure. So the things to consider, of course, if we're going to delay the election to the spring, it is defensible. It must be reasonable and for a public purpose, and both of those must be stated in the ordinance, in the language of the ordinance. And what we did here for you guys is just to consider a proposed schedule with a lot of ifs. Suppose if, let's say the census data comes out in a timely and seamless manner, right? It comes out on the right date, there's no challenges. Let's say we choose the election date of the primary, that would be June 14, 2022. That means we would need to have a map approved by February 22nd in order to meet the filing deadline, because the filing period would open on March 16th. So again, if we're delaying the election, the current members remain until election and verification of any successors, and the newly elected council members would be elected under a shortened term. So bear that in mind. And like I said, these dates, they're not set in stone. It's just to give you an idea of what your options could be if you chose to delay the election. Do you guys have any questions before I move on? Nobody? Okay.
I think, Julia, just one thing to note, the last time that we went through this, once we got the census data, and I think Tracy can verify, we were able to accomplish completion of the new maps with DOJ review in 7 weeks. That's how long it took us.
Yeah, that was actually impressive. I did read the minutes regarding all of that. There was a lot going on. I think what we did really here is take in mind that Christmas would be in the middle of all this as well. So we bought more of a cushion by that February 22nd deadline.
But it's not unreasonable to think we can do it in a couple of months once we've got all the data and a very capable staff and GIS team out there. It's doable.
Absolutely.
Can I ask Councilmember Seeking a question about that? The 7 weeks, how much of that was waiting on DOJ approval?
So Tracy will know the answer to that, but it wasn't very long. They did not adjust us last time. They adjusted us back in 2000, and that actually delayed us. But DOJ, we got through DOJ very quickly. It was not a long period of time. And Councilmember Mitchell and Gregory would probably remember too, but it was quick, super quick.
Yeah, super quick.
And we don't have that this time, so.
Right. So of the 7 weeks, was it 5 weeks of preparation and planning and some meetings?
No.
Yes. those probably all 7 weeks were used to sort of try to get it to a final point. But Tracy can tell you because she was the conductor of the whole
GIS of it.
There's a lot of background work that happens to get this done. So we probably used every minute of time that we had to actually draw the maps.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on then. All right, let's talk about proceeding with the November election. Some points I want you guys to consider. So the first question is, if the city does proceed with the November election, is there a potential violation of the Equal Protection and Voting Rights Act? And the short answer to that is no, and I'm going to tell you why, but I want you to consider these 2 points. First of all, South Carolina is only one of 7 states that has no statutory requirement with regard to timing. Some states say once the census data comes out, you have 30 days to get a new map drawn and adopted. South Carolina doesn't have that. So if there's a challenge as to when we reapportion and adopt a map, it will be driven by case law as far as a consideration by the court. So what do the federal courts say? So I put down 4 specific cases at the bottom here. There's nothing from the 4th Circuit, just so you all know, nothing close to South Carolina. We've got 7th Circuit, we've got 3rd, Alabama, Pennsylvania, Chicago is usually where a lot of the challenges are filed. But of those cases, the courts hold that there is no violation of the Equal Protection Clause or the Voting Rights Act, so long as you, as the governing body, are working on a reasonable plan for periodic reapportionment. And what is reasonable? They're all over the place. This one particular case, Garcia versus 2011 Reapportionment Commission from 2013, it was 15 months before they adopted a plan. Now, bear in mind, there were 12 appeals filed, all related to this. So most of the delay, I'm sure, was associated with the court. But just so you know, it's all over the map as far as how long. As long as it's reasonably conceived and we're working toward that end. Again, the municipal association stepped in and said, you can proceed with your fall elections as scheduled using the old ward maps, but just make sure that we're diligently working to complete the redistricting as quickly as possible and practical. So then my next question, if we adopt a new map, we run the election with the old map, we adopt a new map, is a special election required? Again, sorry, anybody?
No.
Okay, yes, short answer is no. Congratulations, Councilman Mitchell. So there's a case out of Tennessee and a case out of Pennsylvania that talk about this specifically. And what I found pretty interesting about this is it's not constitutionally mandated if we use an old map and we later adopt a new map. And then Donatelli, the 3rd Circuit case out of Pennsylvania, it says if any constituent is disenfranchised, they consider it insignificant and analogous to that suffered by voters who simply move from one district to another. I thought that was pretty strong language for a court to say or to take in a situation like this. And both of these, French and Donatelli, the council members or the senators were elected and had 2 to 3 years remaining on their term at the time. And one thing I wanted to point out to you, in these 2 cases, the court considered and weighed several factors, okay? On one side, they're talking about the expectations of voters, right? The validity of those 4-year terms. I elected you for 4 years. I expect you to represent me for those 4 years. They considered the cost of elections and the need for stability and continuity of office. And they weighed that against the mathematical equality that is dictated by the Equal Protection Clause in the Voting Rights Act. And they determined that the 4 on the left outweighed the 1 on the right. Now, why am I talking to you about Pennsylvania and Tennessee? Let me tell you why. We got one case in South Carolina. It's Judge Traxler. It's out of Columbia. It's Colleton County versus McConnell. And in that case, a group was trying to enjoin or stop a special election using an old, outdated map. And Traxler cites specifically word for word to the French case in allowing them to proceed with the special elections using the old map. I've also got an Attorney General opinion from 2012, strong language, also talking about temporary disenfranchisement is okay. And it's expected and combined effective reapportionment and a staggered election plan, citing Donatelli. Then I've got a 2014 AG opinion citing to the 2012 AG opinion, again, satisfying or agreeing with the notion that if you run an election on an old map, there is no need, but there's no constitutional requirement that you hold a special election, but that those members that are elected on the old map can fulfill their 4-year terms. So again, if we proceed with the November election, the things I want you guys to consider. The release of the data does not trigger an immediate requirement to start reapportionment plans. And the federal courts are more apt to find there's no constitutional violation as long as we are working toward a reasonably conceived plan for periodic reapportionment. And also, if the new map disenfranchises a district, special elections are not required. So do you guys have any questions before we get into the fun stuff, the scenarios?
Councilmember Griffin.
So,
Yes, sir.
so there would be, there is no scenario in South Carolina, no legislation that would say that if we were to wait and do the maps next year and put them towards, you know, the next election, which is 2 years down the road, there's no legal authority saying that we would be making the wrong decision by doing that.
Correct. There is no case law in the state that says that. I think the cases that I showed to you, they use the word reasonable a lot. As long as what we are doing is reasonable and it's explained.
Yes, ma'am. The reason I say that is because really there's a very good chance that we may not get the census data September 30th.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, anyone else before we start talking about scenarios? Okay. All right.
Councilman Waring has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Waring.
Ms. Colton, can you go back to the last screen when it says if talk about disenfranchisement? I mean, with the new map, I think
this one here?
It spoke about, I thought the previous one you just switched from. Go back to the, no, come forward. Forward one. Yeah, number 3.
Yes, sir.
The new map disenfranchises a district. Can you maybe expand on what that means?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure we're going to, I'm sorry, finish your thought. I apologize.
I mean, expand on what disenfranchising means.
Sure. And I have a feeling we'll talk about these when we're talking about the scenarios. Let's say, you know, I'm represented by Ross Appel. I vote for Ross Appel, and then I get redistricted into Councilmember Mitchell's district. Well, I didn't vote for Councilman Mitchell, so I'm disenfranchised because I voted for someone who no longer represents my interests.
Okay.
For the next 3.5 years.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
Sure.
You've still got a council member. It's just not the one you started with.
Right.
Right.
It would be an improvement in that case.
Very well could be. So let's talk about scenarios. Scenario 1, and again, we're throwing these out here for conversation. We are not suggesting that you take any of these. We're not saying that these are the only scenarios, but this is things that we're putting on the table so you guys can start talking about what you think is best. So scenario 1 would be delaying the election. We adopt the map to go into effect immediately to be utilized in the spring. That would be held for all even seats. So the current sitting members would stay in place until the election and swearing in. So your terms would be extended essentially for what, another 5-6 months until your successor is sworn in. And then the newly elected members would have a shortened term, 3.5 years, maybe shorter. Scenario 2.
Julia, before you go forward, I just want to point out with that, those dates you had with this scenario earlier, you showed the election to be June 14th, which technically is in summer, or almost, right?
True.
Almost summer. So, but the thing about that is it would fall on the same date as a primary election. So it would ostensibly be more convenient for the election commission and probably save some money for the city since we're not running the election on our own. But that's just a sidebar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I might just comment on that really quickly, Mr. Mayor, I think one of the problems with holding an election in a nonpartisan single member district scenario when you have partisan primary elections would be confusing and almost unworkable.
Yes.
So I just think we need to think about that. Anyway, there's a long way to go between here and there, but I do think that that is probably not the best scenario.
All right.
Anyone else?
Valid opinion.
Okay, let's talk about scenario 2.
Councilmember Jackson.
Sorry, I can't see anybody.
I don't have a lot to comment on right now. I just wanted Councilmember Seekings to clarify his last statement. I think he meant it wasn't a good date for a scenario 1. Would you agree with that?
Yes, that was my point.
Yeah, okay.
I think what he's saying is it's not a bad scenario, but you wouldn't want to have the election date on the primary date as I just described. You could have it in early May or in late April, maybe.
Right. Yeah, that's why I wanted him to clarify it.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So scenario 2, here's another option. We proceed with the November election. We redistrict and adopt the map to take effect for the 2023 elections. All odd member districts will run for a 4-year term, and even member districts will run for a 2-year term. So that's scenario 2. You want me to just go through all of these and then we can talk? Is that okay?
Sure.
Scenario 3, proceed with the November election, adopt map to take effect in 2023. Upon ratification, the odd seats would run by the new map, and the even seats would remain and fulfill the remainder of their 4-year term. Scenario 4, proceed with the November election, adopt the map to take effect 2025. Even seats fulfill remainder of their 4-year term, odd seats run in 2023 by the old map, and they also fulfill the remainder of their 4-year term. That's another option. So those are the only 4 I've thrown out here with the help of the group. But before we start going into discussion about scenarios, I just want you to know, if we do vote to proceed with the November election, we are suggesting that we do it by resolution, just to be clear to the public. But again, that's something that's up for discussion. We wanted to put that out there. We need it by May or June. Yes, sir.
If you can pull those back up, I don't know if I saw one that I thought was also doable. Those scenarios. So go back to scenario 1.
Sure.
All right, and then scenario 2. Okay, so scenario 2 is we proceed with the November election. So that would just go on, and all the even number council members would run. If they have opposition, they have opposition, and whatever happens with that election happens with that election. And you are only running for a 2-year term if you're an even numbered council member. And then in 2023, all of us will be up again for a 4-year term at that point.
If you're, let's see, who's running this time? Even is up in 2021. So 2023.
So 2021 election takes place in November 7th, 2021. We adopt a new map, and then all 12 of us are up for re-election in 2023.
Correct, but the way it's written, you would be running for a 4-year term, and the even numbers would be running for their 2-year terms.
Right, okay. And that's why I think that maybe that sort of threw me off the way that was worded a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, but it would, in November of 2021, you're only running for a 2-year term?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
Under that scenario.
Yeah, you're running for a 2-year term, Peter, in your existing district. And then the reapportionment would take place to take effect in the 2023 elections. Everyone would run in their new districts. The odd member districts would run for a 4-year term. The even member districts would run for a 2-year term.
Of course, you got the possibility, it's not impossible somebody might not live in their old district anymore. And that could impact things as well. Councilmember Shealy.
Well, and maybe I misunderstood, but in that scenario we were talking about, all 12 of us would run at one time?
Correct.
Correct? I mean, wow, that scares me a little bit because it could be a complete turnover of council in 1 year, which I know North Charleston and some others, have that situation, but it just seems like a scary scenario to me. But thank you.
Correct. Julia, you want to go back to where you dropped off there a moment ago?
Sure, unless Councilmember Seekings has a question. I saw his hand.
Oh,
but-
okay. Councilmember Seekings.
I wasn't sure if you were done with scenarios because I think you're missing the most obvious scenario if you're done.
I'm done with the scenarios, absolutely. And this wasn't meant to be all inclusive, I promise.
So I think as you think about this and we talk about it collectively as a group, there is a fifth scenario that to me would probably be the most practical, and that is this: that we have elections in November if we choose to have them. We then get the numbers and we redistrict, and only if redistricting mandates that we have a special election or two, which would mean that we redistrict to a place where no one lives, we would then have a special election for that district and probably one other, because there would be two people in that one district. And to me, that, because it's possible, we don't know, that when we get the numbers and we redistrict, that everyone will live, although a new geographic district will all live in separate districts and have the whole city covered. But it's also possible, and I mean, I think there's two places in the city where there's been so much growth that it's likely that we will have a district that does not currently have any of us living in it. So I just think that's, to me, the simplest and easiest scenario that requires the least amount of work and worry and doesn't put us all up for election in 1 year after having had to run campaigns twice in 2 years. So anyway.
Mike, I think the one thing you have to think about that is the impact that has in one vote, and the fact that you have folks not being able to vote for several years, but the councilman who's going to be representing that district.
Well, no matter what happens, Rick, in redistricting, there are going to be a number of people who are going to get different new council members, even if we don't change. I mean, last time in 2010, as you recall, not that, I mean, there's lots of examples, but my district was probably an extreme example. I represented half of West Ashley and half downtown. And within 2 years of the election, I was all downtown. So I lost almost 2/3 of my district. So if we're talking about not having the person that you voted for being disenfranchised, that's going to happen no matter what we do with these districts. And the other example I think that's likely this time around is Councilmember Del Chapo has probably a whole district sitting there at Daniel Island all to herself. And she currently spans an entire river and a whole other part of the city. So anyway, I just think it's a scenario we should think about because I think it's the least disruptive and I think it's the least disruptive.
Well,
and we might get lucky.
If I may comment on that though, scenario 3 just allows for 6 to go up for election on 2023 and just lets the even seats keep their 4-year term. So you don't have to have the special election. At the end of the day, every citizen is going to be in a district and be represented by somebody, but anyway, that's just an observation. Councilmember Shade.
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. This is maybe more for Tracy than it is for Julia. And Tracy, not that I want you to guess, but I suspect there are other tools out there aside from the Census Bureau that sort of gives us sort of a sense of how the population has shifted. Is that accurate? I mean, do you have an idea of where we're going to really need to be looking at changing some of these district lines?
Funny you should bring that up. I think we have a slide coming up.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to the legal team to respond.
District 6 and District 4.
I believe we would only do that in executive session.
Well, before we leave the scenarios, can I ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
Sure, absolutely. Councilmember Waring.
Go back to scenario 1, Ms. Copeland. Explain to me the advantage of waiting until potentially, 5-6 months to have an election. What's the advantage of doing that?
Oh, are you asking because I offered up June as a potential
Yeah,
option?
but I understood what the mayor said. It could be May or it could be, late April or whatever. But instead of having the elections in November, why would we delay it until 5-6 months later? What's the big advantage to the citizens? Forget incumbents, but I mean, what's the big advantage to the citizens?
Councilmember Waring, this is Susan. I think there are a couple of advantages or ways to look at it. One is if you get your map, if you've already had your election in November and you look at your map, you may decide that it is so disproportionate to where you are right now that you may want to hold a special election. And so that is one reason to delay. You don't go through, you don't have to go through the exercise of 2 elections. You don't have council members having run in November and then running again in the spring. So I think that's 1 or 2 of the arguments that have been put out there for scenario number 1. And I see Councilmember Jackson's got her hand up and she's probably got about 10 other reasons, but that is an option.
I got to be frank. I think what Councilmember Seeking said to me makes the most sense. But anyway, and I think that number 5 should somehow be put on there. I understand, Ms. Copeland, why you didn't have it on there, but I think that's one on the other side of this discussion that should be included. Thank you.
And there may be other scenarios that y'all come up with.
Right.
We acknowledge that. Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, I would just thank you. I appreciate the chance to just, I think for me, an obvious reason to consider scenario number 1, or, at least look at its pros and cons seriously, is that is the only option that we have that would assure voters that they live, that a district has been accurately created for them in a timely manner, and they are going to have the chance to vote for the person that represents their accurately redescribed district. So I'm concerned that we've got a lot of voter skeptics in the world today. We've certainly seen that on a variety of topics, and people are hard to convince of the truth and the facts. And I don't think it would help us on that logic of having old districts that they may not even be part of provide the representation, on sort of we're going to get it right sooner or later, but we can't promise you in November that you're going to be electing the person that can actually legally represent you once we do redistrict. So that's
Councilor, can I follow? I follow you on the districts that's up for re-election, but I represent an odd number district. Mm-hmm. So, in your example, we have election in May. So the even number district, you were right on, but the 6 odd number district, we still subject to be representing people that didn't vote for us, with the redrawing of all 12 districts. So I agree with you on half, but I do not agree with you on the districts that are not up, because we have staggered election. Mm-hmm. If we were all up for election at the same time, I would agree with that scenario. But anyway, thank you.
So you can solve that with scenario number 2. Councilmember Griffin and then Mitchell.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Jackson. There's a lot of people out there that are skeptics of voting. I think we've obviously seen that just last year. one thing that will really scare people is if you start delaying elections. And let me tell you why I feel like we should go ahead and have this election in November before we go into the executive session. We don't know how the federal government is going to release this data or when. That scenario, number one, was presented to us as an option that if we got the data at the end of September, if everything worked out, then we could potentially have the election, late spring, early summer. Let's just say we don't get the data then. Do we continue to delay this election to the point where we're now serving an additional year of a 4-year term? We were elected to serve for 4 years, and that's what we need to do. We need to do whatever we can to uphold that 4 years as close as possible, and not knowing, we're taking a shot in the dark to say that we're definitely going to have the data September 30th. We don't get it. Let's just say it delays into the late fall or into the winter. We would be doing a disservice to our citizens to say that we as incumbents are deciding that we're going to serve an additional year. And that to me is going to really, really hurt the morale of this city. So I think that the best scenario so far that we've been presented would be number 3, because we don't all want to run at once either. We have staggered elections for a reason, that we have some continuity each time that we run by having 6 people that have some experience. We all know how we felt when we first got into office. It was a pretty steep learning curve. Those first 6 months to a year, we had to learn a lot. Could you imagine if we had 12 people with no prior knowledge serving all at the same time? It would be very, very difficult. So to me, scenario 3 makes the most sense. And if we were to take a vote, I think we need to take a vote much, as soon as possible, because we have people that are already running to fill these seats. We have people that are running for re-election. Yes, the voting, the filing period doesn't start till August, but we're in the heat of a race already, and people deserve to know when that election date is going to be. So I hope we can come to a conclusion, give people a sense of where we stand, and get this on the agenda for a vote as soon as possible. I'm inclined to go with number 3 if that was presented to me. Thank you.
Councilmember Mitchell and then Gregory.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and Councilmember, I heard what everyone was saying. I think for the drawing the maps and whatever, I think this is my 3rd time in redistricting. I think I'm one of the oldest one been there, and even have got caught up in redistricting when 2 districts was merged together, 2 and 4 at the time. And I had to come back and run again, but I didn't run. I stayed out for term and then was called back, But I believe myself that it should proceed as it should. November come, I think we should proceed with the election and just let the election go on. I don't think we need to delay the election, hold off the election. Pretty soon they'll be able to vote when the time comes, but we need to proceed with the election as it stands. Because if we do that, we're gonna have to still figure out a way down the road how to fix it again. Something else gonna come up. I think we just need to proceed with the election. We don't know what the reapportionment, with the numbers going to come out. I think we just need to proceed with the election and go on as it is. I have been in this council all the time when we had these reapportionment in 2000, 2010, now 2020 with reapportionment. Each time, we never delayed the election. We went on with the election, regardless. And that's what we did all the time. So I think we need to just keep it as a schedule and just go ahead with the election. And that's my take on it. I don't think we need to delay nothing.
Councilmember Gregory and then Brady.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, Councilman Mitchell, but I also think that was the recommendation from Councilmember Seekings. And I think that we need to put that scenario number 5 down there as we move forward. But I definitely agree. I think we should move forward with this election accordingly.
Councilmember Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just had a quick question. Necessity is often the mother of invention. Do we know what some of the other larger municipalities are looking at in terms of like what Columbia and Greenville, are potentially considering? Because everybody's finding themselves in the same boat. And I was just curious how the other people are deciding to row.
Sure. Greenville is proceeding with the November election. Rock Hill is delaying the election. And City of Columbia is still doing one of those. I think they're watching us, honestly.
They have hybrid elections because they have at-large and single members, so that complicates it a little bit.
Right.
They've got a mayor's race up there too.
Yeah.
Big one.
So we do have some internal preliminary data that would show impact, but it's very unofficial. If y'all would like to discuss that, I would entertain a motion that would go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, before we go into executive session, can we just agree that we would put scenario 5 down?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gregory, I'll talk with Julia just so she makes sure that she understands what my scenario 5 is. It's not that complicated, I promise.
It really isn't. It's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple.
Y'all describe it right, and in your sleep tonight, you might wake up in the morning with scenario 6. You never know.
Right.
Councilmember.
Julia, I'll get with you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Another quick question. We talked about perhaps the creation of a election commission or redistricting commission. Is that something we need to decide in a short time frame?
Well, we would need to certainly decide that before the data comes in, and it'd be reasonable to give them a little head time to get ready for it. But the thought was to have an independent group. Of course, they would only be making a recommendation to council, and it's council's decision at the end of the day. But to involve some community members, and frankly, we've had a discussion with the Riley Center with the College of Charleston, and they're willing, as they stepped up to the plate many times to help our city. They would help lead the effort. If it was the will of council to have an independent group. This is to look at the actual redistricting recommendation. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yeah, before we go on, Mr. Mayor, even the South Carolina voter participation, they're the one that assisted us in drawing the maps and the reapportionment the last 2 times, I believe it was.
That's right. And we've gotten a letter from Mr. Welch.
Right.
And he's he's standing by, ready to help again.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Mayor, just last question.
Yes, sir.
I know that the statute has changed and you don't have to try to create as many majority districts as you can. However, while the federal statute does not require that, is that something that a municipality can do? To still continue to try to preserve as many minority districts as we can?
I would say that even though we're not subject to the review of the Department of Justice, that I would propose that we act like we're subject to their review, and that we follow that goal along with the other goals that Julia or Tracy stated earlier in the presentation. It can't be the only factor, but it can be a factor. And like I say, I think we ought to operate just as if DOJ was looking over our shoulder anyway.
I agree.
Agree.
So, and I don't think it'll take us very long. We only have one slide to show y'all. Can I entertain a motion?
I still move to go into executive session.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.